feel very inadequate now, Steve. I got to be honest with you.
Why is that?
Because you're sitting there with like the Jay-Z, microphone like spit thing, and I've got these like crappy little ear pods in. I'm like,
But look, I'm using wired headphones though. That's like so old school.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give you that. I will give you that. Like, where did you get those off? Like a JetBlue plane or something like
that? They're like $10.
I think those are white. I actually think those are white now.
Yeah, no, these are like $10 marshmallow earbuds, but I love them. They're the only ones that stay in my ears. The AirPods won't stay in.
All right.
My ears are weirdly shaped. I don't know.
Well, the last time you were on, you had these giant ass, like, what's happening, 1970s earphones on. And I felt really inadequate about that.
I should start using the big headphones. I feel like at least those are stylish, and these are just practical without the style.
Stylish? You think those are stylish?
I don't know. I guess I'm like,
I see people at the gym running with those, and I'm like, aren't those weighing you down? Like, don't those weigh like 6 pounds?
It's resistance training.
I guess so. So we got some people online, I guess, right?
Yeah, we got some people in here.
They're folding in. So quickly, let me first of all, thanks for filling my students. So I just, for everybody who doesn't know me, you probably know who Steve is. My name is Don McCauley. I'm the president and founder of a company called Law Preview, which is a law school prep course owned by Barbary. And I'm not the big topic or of discussion tonight. We have a blog on the Law Preview website that constantly is getting hits and questions about the LSAT, and I got to be honest with you, I have no idea. So I thought I'd reach out to my good friend Steve Schwartz, who runs LSAT Unplugged, and he can answer some questions. So, but I don't want to answer introduce you with all your background. So go ahead and give a quick background as to who you are, Steve.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Don. Thanks for having me and organizing this. So for those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. I've been teaching the LSAT for about 15 years now. My own LSAT journey was from a 152 to a 175. Took me about a year to get there. And my hope is that it won't take students out there studying nearly that long. My goal is to kind of ease the way. And so I have a ton of resources. And my big focus these days, of course, is the digital LSAT, which of course we'll get into a bit tonight.
Right. And you're going to do like a freestyle rap for us with that thing in front of your mic? Or no?
Nobody wants to. Nobody wants to.
No,
see that.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Sure.
A freestyle. I'm gonna give you 3 topics on the LSAT, and you have to form a rap. How's that?
Oh wow, freestyle improv. So, no, that's not my thing. No.
Then I don't want to do this interview. I forget. Okay?
We'll save it for the
after party. I don't think you're qualified. I do not think you're qualified. All right. All right. So yeah, let's talk about the LSAT right now. I mean, like, honestly, imagine you have a student who has no clue as to, or they think they want to go to law school, or they're leaning that way. And if they, ask me, I will, may disabuse them of that notion. But if you have a kid who wants to start, exploring the law school admissions process, I guess the first part to start and think about is the LSAT, right?
Yeah, of course. So the LSAT is, of course, the most important factor in the law school admission process. And just to frame this discussion a little bit, we're coming right now. It's the week after the September LSAT this past Saturday. And so anyone who's just starting off now, totally fresh, October, November LSATs, just a month or 2 months away, that's too soon. I wouldn't recommend taking the LSAT with only a month or 2 of prep. I would instead suggest minimum 3 to 5 months. Aim to take it January at the earliest, maybe the spring, and then ideally look to apply next fall if they're starting off totally fresh. On the other hand, if they just took September, they could maybe retake in October or November. In addition, because they're at least they're not starting from total scratch, they do have somewhat of a foundation.
Right.
As for how you get that foundation, that's a totally different thing. The biggest place I would start, of course, is the actual official LSAT prep tests published by LSAC.
Right. Now, so the standard advice when I was applying to law school is, in terms of when to take the LSAT, it was like, when you're ready, does that still apply now that you have because last year we ran our video series and we interviewed Kelly Testy, who's the new president of the LSAT, or LSAC, I guess. And her big thing was that she brought the digital LSAT to life. I guess, obviously before that, people were taking it like I did with a number 2 pencil. Have they made the transition over now to full digital? Because I know they were sort of spacing it in. So has it made its full transition?
Yeah, it has. Actually, September, this past Saturday, was the first fully digital LSAT in North America. The July LSAT was the transitional exam. Half the students got the paper, half got the digital. But now with September and beyond, in North America, meaning US and Canada, it's totally digital, being administered on a tablet, a Microsoft Surface Go specifically, 10-inch tablet. There have been some tech issues that I'm hoping with time they will start to resolve more and more as time goes on.
Right.
But both July and September did have a few minor tech snafus, but hopefully they'll fix those going forward. Now,
are the scores? I know that is it the GMAT that gives you the score right away. Does that happen with the LSAT?
Sadly, no. I'm hoping with time they will, and they could at least give students the number they got correct, even if they don't give them the raw score conversion to a scaled score out of 180. They should be able to do that, and I think with time they will. Maybe they just don't want angry students yelling at proctors who are simply the guy who was hired to be there that weekend. Right. I don't know. But hopefully with time, they'll be able to give students more information immediately. But for now, it still is approximately a 3-week wait, as it always has been.
Wow. Okay. So let's, we're taking the LSAT. It's going to be on a tablet. Does that, first of all, does the digital approach change the way you study for it?
It should quite a bit, actually, of course, because the content doesn't change at all. It's still one section of games, 2 sections of reasoning, 1 section of reading comp. The questions are identical in style, in format, but the difference is, of course, you're now taking it with this new interactive digital interface where you can only see 1 question at a time, and you can't draw freehand on the tablet itself. You have to use LSAC's annotation tools, highlighting, underlining, and such. There are some good features, though. You can flag questions to come back to later, and you can eliminate answer choices and they will kind of gray out on the screen. What that means for students prepping, of course, is that they can't only study out of books. They've got to do a few exams in the digital style. LSAC has made a few available on their website at familiar.lsac.org. Students can go on there and play around with the features. I recommend, of course, using a tablet. Doesn't have to be the Microsoft Surface Go specifically. Any tablet's fine. A Samsung, an iPad. You could buy an Amazon Fire for $150 and return it afterwards if you decide that it's not for you, just to get a little bit of experience with it, because it is not the same on a phone or a computer.
Right. So it's so funny that because we polled admissions officers last year. I don't think I shared the results of that poll with you, but we posted them on our website. I forgive me if I didn't send it to you. It was fascinating. But one of the things that we asked the deans of admission was, when you pick up a student's file, what's the first thing that you look at? And overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly, above 80%, like the LSAT score, undergraduate GPA to some extent, but really the LSAT score. Why do you think it's such a big why are schools so reliant on it as a predictor of law school ability and maybe even success?
That's a great question, Don. I think in part, there's a couple of things. One of them is, of course, grade inflation. There's a lot of grade inflation at a lot of colleges and universities. Right. And it's impossible. There are hundreds of colleges and universities in the country. You can't possibly know the details on every single one, including all the different undergraduate majors. And then, of course, some majors, it's easier to get an A than others. Like computer science might be tougher than sociology or English or what have you, something in the humanities, right?
Right.
And some professors are easier than others. I mean, remember, I had one professor who just gave everybody A's because he didn't believe in grades. Definitely a good class to take for law school. But
no joke.
but there's, of course, there's something questionable there. The LSAT is the truly single objective measure of students' ability. No grade inflation possible. No variation possible. LSAC, they're wizards over there with their knowledge of statistics. These test forms really are identical to each other in every possible way. And so that's the single reliable factor they can look at. Plus, it has a strong demonstrated correlation with first-year law school grades, which of course are related to bar passage rates. And law schools care very much about bar passage rates.
Right. So in terms of other tests that are becoming more and more, at least allowed, but not necessarily, I don't think, favored, in terms of the GRE, And then there was a recent article about schools allowing another test this year. And I forget which one it was. It might have been the GMAT.
Really?
That a couple schools, yeah, no, and this is recent. I'm talking like in the last 2 months. I saw an article about a law school or two tinkering with the idea of allowing the GMAT as an entrance exam. First off, in terms of a law school, I know from the work that I do that they have to have some kind of a gatekeeping function to make sure that there are not a lot of bad actors out there in terms of law schools allowing students in who can't complete the 3-year curriculum. And to do that is to sentence somebody to a lifetime of basically owning a mortgage without a house, in terms of the student loans. So why do you think? I'm assuming that you've done some research, at least on the GRE, in terms of the comparison between the LSAT. What's your experience between people taking the GRE versus the LSAT, or maybe even some people who take both?
There's something I've been quite curious about in the past couple of years is, of course, Harvard was the big name that started taking the GRE, and then other schools followed suit. And I was it kind of frustrated me a little bit, just because the ETS, the people who make the GRE, they haven't truly demonstrated, at least in my opinion, that the GRE is a valid predictor of anything, first-year law school grades, bar passage rates, what have you. But and schools in the top 14, anyone they're going to admit is going to do perfectly fine. No one getting into Harvard Law is at risk of reasonably likely to fail the bar. Mm-hmm. But the GRE itself, what is it really testing? It's like the SAT. Now, of course, law school applicants just want to know, will they get in with this? I've talked to a handful of admission officers about this, and what they tell me is that they're taking less than 5% of applicants with GRE scores specifically. And those people usually have something unique in their background, probably a ton of impressive work experience where the law school just wants this person because of where they're going to go after law school. But if you're the typical applicant straight out of college, working as a paralegal, they want to see that you're serious about law school, and taking the LSAT and doing well on it is the best way to indicate that.
Right. I mean, I think that also it also sort of, even though it started with Harvard, it picked up momentum because law schools were really just fighting for the brain drain of everybody going to business school or other graduate programs rather than law school after the economic crunch, and for quite a few years after that, where law firms weren't hiring as many associates. Partners at the largest law firms in the world are like, wow, we could do a lot more with a lot less sometimes. And why does hiring Steve Schwartz, another associate, how is that going to help pay the mortgage on my Hamptons house? So let's not hire him. But I guess now that the hiring has come back, I think that that schools are, like you said, I would even be shocked it's 5%. I would say, from my conversations with deans of admissions, and even we actually did a poll of students. We do a poll every year called, class of 2022, 2021, what makes you tick, sort of like figuring out who they are and what they did. And I think that the results of that poll came back at like 2% of the kids who took the GRE. And overwhelmingly, it was like, hey, I already took it. And if I could apply to law school with it, like, why not? Let me throw in an application.
That's kind of what law schools are going for in a way, because they want to look more selective. And so if they can solicit more applications and decrease the percentage accepted, then that looks better for them in the rankings. So they say, send us your applications.
Wait, hold on. You're talking about something that doesn't exist, though. Yield protection doesn't exist, right? Like there's schools that, I'm joking. In terms of that's what you're speaking about, right? Yield protection in terms of the number of applicants that apply, and then the number of applicants that they ultimately accept, and then obviously those who accept their offer, right? Going into the U.S. News and World Report rankings, which is a completely another part of the conversation. Let's get back to the LSAT though. All right.
Sure.
You're me, or you're a student who is serious about going to law school, and has to tackle the LSAT. How much time do you budget for that? Like, how much time would your son or daughter wants to go to law school next year? What advice would you give them from beginning to end?
So let's say if they're in college or they're working, then they're studying for the LSAT on the side. I would say put in ideally 15 to 20 hours per week consistently, and build the foundation first. Get one of those books of LSAT exams. They sell them in books of 10 on Amazon for about $20 each. Get one of the recent ones administered in the past 5-10 years and build the foundation. I recommend a 5-step approach to studying. I call it the LASER approach: learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. Learning is the theory, just studying the textbook, the different question types, getting a sense of what the LSAT involves. Accuracy is doing individual questions by type. Sections is 35-minute timed sections to work on your pacing. E is for endurance, doing full-length 5-section exams. And then review.
How many of those would you do?
I would do at least 10. 10 full-length timed exams under realistic test day-like conditions. Students often wonder, why did my test day score drop from my practice? Because the practice wasn't realistic enough. So really be really strict with yourself and do at least 10 so that test day is like just another practice.
Gotcha. It's have you been following? I'm assuming you've been following the Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History.
Yes, I listened to those. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when he interviews Dan Edmonds and John Katzman, other people that I know in your industry, the advice they give is it's not about getting the right answer. It's about finding the best answer quickly. And is that sort of the idea behind the realistic timing and or making sure that you are doing these things in a time pressured approach rather than basically lazily going through the book and understanding the questions, trying to get the right answer, obviously, but not doing it in a disciplined, quick way?
I think that, and I had my issues with that podcast, and we can get into that if you want, but
I would love to.
Yeah, sure. But I will say that they were correct that the time constraint is a major part of what makes the LSAT difficult. And on reading comprehension especially, it is about picking the best of the worst. The correct answer will not be worded in an ideal fashion, the way that you would have constructed it yourself.
Right.
But it is technically correct.
Gotcha. So when we led this off, and I do want to get back to the podcast because actually, why not? What were your issues with it? I
think that there is something to be said for being able to solve the questions quickly, and I felt like Malcolm Gladwell was saying the tortoise versus the hare. Let's root for the tortoises, get rid of the time constraint, loosen the time constraint. It's one thing to get the questions correct. It's another thing to get them correct under timed conditions. And lawyers, a lot of them do bill by the hour. And whether you're in a courtroom or not, there is value in being able to do something quickly. And, the Noodle guys, Katzman and them, I think that they were saying, like, you don't have to, don't actually try to understand what you're reading to a certain extent. They were saying things like that. And I was like, don't understand it. Like, I get that you kind of want to skim a little bit because of the time constraint, but you should still try to walk away with the main idea. Right.
Well, so you're speaking to a tortoise. All right. And I was not somebody who could parlay a 152 to 175 on the LSAT like you did, which I have to get back to figure out exactly how you did that. The laser approach, I'm assuming, is the foundation for that, but there's got to be some other things that you did. But I will also say, having been the tortoise and, also training a lot of tortoises, where I really did, what resonated with me about that podcast was, even though you do want your doc or your lawyer to move quickly, right? You want them to be right, and having been at a large law firm for a number of years, prior to starting Law Preview, one of the things that sort of frustrated me was that you were rewarded for almost inefficiency, right? It was, Steve, don't give me what you think is the right answer. Give me what you know is the right answer. And when your reputation is trading on every case that you work on, right? Every matter, both inside and outside the firm, you want that lawyer to, understand every word that you say. So, like, in terms of, the LSAT as a predictor for, training our best lawyers in the world, I can understand that you wouldn't want your top lawyers in the country to race through an issue. Actually, none of them would. But for this one test, it's just frustrating, I guess, for at least from his approach, looking at it, saying this is how we're choosing the nation's best lawyers, is by how well they perform on this time-pressured exam. I thought it was fascinating. I really did. I thought it, Bill Henderson, another guy that I do know in the industry, he teaches at University of Indiana. I've sat on a couple boards with him. And I knew that he was doing that in terms of giving extended time on his first year and his upper level classes, the exams. And he's like, the quality of the exam answer goes up, which is great, but I'm also not a fan of the 24-hour take-home exam. I think that that's just cruel, in law school. But let's get back to you. So you went from the 150s to 175. How is that even possible? Because all the reading that I've done, or all the people that I've ever spoken to, is, in terms of retaking the LSAT, the chances of you moving up even 5 points, because it's such a big jump in percentile, is not very great. And I say not very great because I have no control of math. That's why I went to law school. So I would imagine it's infinitesimal in terms of the size of. But how did you do it? How did you jump that big jump?
Well, a couple of things I'll say. First off, that the average person who retakes does not go up that much, maybe a couple points. And I imagine that's because maybe they booked the exam, they were busy with college, busy with work, busy with family. They kind of procrastinated studying, didn't do that much. And then test day rolls around, it's something, it's a week away, I better crack the books. And they don't do that much. That's probably why most people don't go up on retakes. As for my own personal story, my score increase was largely because, like a lot of students, I did no studying before taking a cold diagnostic, and the results, of course, were discouraging. It's like taking a test in a foreign language. Of course, you're not going to do well. You don't know anything yet. Right. All that tells you is that I don't know the LSAT, but it can be learned. And it is a test of pattern recognition. And for me especially, I was never a math person. Of course, I was a prelaw. So naturally, I bombed games. Games are not math, but they do relate in some way. I didn't know how to diagram. I didn't know what they were really asking for. I didn't know how to make inferences. I didn't know the contrapositive barely. And so it was natural that that section would just be a big fat zero practically. Blind guessing. Now, the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. That's really what it's all about on every section. And so how do people deal with the time constraint? It's because when you're looking at a new question, you're not really solving that question. You're solving all the questions like it you've ever done in the past.
Than before,
So you're relating it back, even subconsciously somewhat. There aren't that many methods of reasoning on the LSAT. There aren't that many new things under the sun. They reuse old stuff all the time.
Right. And that gets to their ability to equate the exam pretty well, right?
Exactly.
Right. So just for the audience, can you explain to the audience what the difference between scaling, equating, and, doing a curve is?
Yeah, sure. So test equating is the process by which LSAT ensures that any new LSAT test form, meaning new 4-section test, LSAT prep test, will relate to all the previous ones, so that a 170 on the October LSAT is considered identical to a 170 on September and a 170 on March and June and so on, that all tests are roughly equal. Now, a curved exam is like when you go in for a final in college and you want to sabotage the guy next to you, because if he does worse, then you do better. That sort of thing, where there's competition amongst people in the same pool. The LSAT doesn't want everyone backstabbing each other, so they kind of equate it all behind the scenes. That's part of why it takes 3 weeks to get your score back, because they want to make sure that people performed as expected for them to scale from a raw score, which is like maybe you got 10 questions wrong out of 100, that would equate to roughly a 170 out of 180.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. So in terms of, in my day, the idea was you take the LSAT only once, right? That law schools were averaging scores. That's not the case anymore.
Correct.
They take their, why penalize themselves? I guess they thought, just like colleges will take the highest score. I don't know if I don't think they super score them, but like they do, like some colleges will. But they will take the best score now. The overwhelming majority of the law schools. I don't want to speak for all of them, right?
Yeah, pretty much all of them. Yeah, that change happened in 2006. Now, the American Bar Association only requires the highest score to be submitted.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of, with that, what are the advantages or disadvantages, and when should you cancel your score? In terms of cancel your test?
Yeah, I kind of wish they would get rid of the canceling option. I think it creates so much unnecessary stress for students. And yeah, if
Right.
something went horribly wrong, like you misbubbled something, which isn't really possible on digital now anyway.
Right.
But if you like totally bombed an entire section or just blanked out, had a panic attack, got sick, and you know that you did terribly, then you might want to cancel. But otherwise, if you have that vague sense of unease that things could have gone a little bit better and you didn't do as well as you could have on this one game and later you figured out a better way to solve it after the fact, that's the sort of thing that would be nice to happen. But just retake. Right. They don't want your explanations on an addendum of how you could have done a few points better, but your dog got sick and you ate your LSAT book and whatnot, right? Like just retake it. And now with 9-10 tests a year, practically every month, there's really no excuse not to retake if you think you could do better. And that's where I think the canceling naturally for me leads into retakes. Because if it didn't go well, just take it again. And especially this fall, you've got October and you've got November ahead of you. Plus even January is still okay.
Right. So in terms of the writing sample on the digital LSAT, how are they handling that?
Yeah, so that's actually a big format change. It's no longer on test day itself. Instead, it's on your own time, whenever you want. It still is timed, it still is 35 minutes, but you're not doing it at the test center anymore. Instead, you're doing it from the comfort of your own home or your library, wherever you want to bring your laptop, and you just complete it later. You have up to 1 year to complete it after your test administration, but law schools will not release your score. The LSAC will not release your score to law schools until you complete it.
Gotcha. So you're going on to a portal that once you start typing, it starts the time clock. Is that what it is?
Exactly. You're going on LSAC's site, you're logging in, and once you they help you get your text set up appropriately. And once you click start, timer starts, and you're off to the races.
How, like, in all honesty, how important is the written portion of the LSAT? And good.
It's still not that important, but it's a little bit more important than it used to be because they can actually read what you're typing now. Back when it was handwritten, they weren't going to bother sifting through all your terrible handwriting. Nobody has good handwriting anymore. But I was actually talking to the dean of UCLA, and he was saying how like now it's wonderful for him because he can just quickly skim them, and it's all typed. It's perfect. Right. Maybe they will look at it a little bit more, but still, it's mostly for people where they have concerns over their writing abilities. If they bombed English class or they're a non-native speaker, they want to make sure that you're proficient.
Right. It's funny. I also spoke to a couple of. We work really closely with our, a couple scholarship programs that we run through the law schools for students to come and take our program, the law preview program. And they, what the hell was that? That's like the largest mug I've ever seen.
I know. I go pretty hard.
By the way, what are you drinking? What are you drinking?
This is a turmeric chai tea.
So fancy.
It's so fancy. Only the best for my LSAT classes. Yeah.
I didn't realize. So they, but a lot of the deans of admission use it as a check against the personal statement. That they want to make sure that, Steve's writing style is comparable to what he submitted as the, on your personal statement. Otherwise, maybe he didn't write it.
Exactly.
Which is something that I was like, oh, wow, that's an interesting use of that tool, which I never thought, in my day when I was taking the LSAT, they were like, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. And you're right, probably because like most law school admission teams wouldn't sit there and try to read through the response.
If they're only spending like 5 minutes on an application anyway, writing sample gets 20 seconds?
Right. So, so now, okay, we've taken the LSAT. All right. We think we can do better. Maybe we cancel our score according to your advice. If you walk out feeling queasy, you took the LSAT. That's really just a figment of living the life of somebody who's taken the LSAT. For whatever reason you want to retake, what's the best way to prepare for a retake?
So you want to think about what you're going to do differently next time around. If there's a resource you didn't get that you maybe should have or thought about or considered, this is the time to do that. If you skimped on LSAT books and didn't want to get enough exams, don't skimp on them. It's the best investment you'll ever make. Go get another couple of books of exams so you're arming yourself with the best materials possible. And then focus on your weak areas. Take more timed practice tests. Increase the depth of your review process. Really analyze where your misunderstandings are stemming from. Because like I said, it's a test of pattern recognition. These things repeat. If there's a question you got wrong last week and you don't fully understand it, it's going to come up again in a different form in a future exam. And you don't want to get it wrong then too. So learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, a lot of it's like Pavlov's dogs. Once you see it, once you get accustomed to it, you don't want to go for the wrong answer every time that they always throw out there at you. It's sort of like forcing yourself to stop drooling and say, okay, wait, hold on. I've recognized my salivary glands are going, something's wrong here. I want to go for A, but I know it can't be A. It's got to be one of the other choices. Is that what you're doing on LSAT Unplugged? Like, how are you in terms of your students? When you talk about your students, what kind of course offerings are you providing? Is it all online? Do you do in class?
Yeah, it's all online.
Okay.
I have live online video, like master classes. I have Q&As. I walk through student written explanations.
Masterclass. You sound very fancy. What's a masterclass?
It's when we really get in depth with the students' review processes so that we can see what tricks are they uniquely falling for. I actually have students write out their own explanations for questions they got wrong. So we analyze what tricks and traps that student is uniquely prone to falling for so they don't make the same mistake again.
So is this a one-on-one thing, or is it a group thing that you're doing?
It's a group thing.
Okay. So you're actually doing, there's actually feedback in terms of, are they on camera with you, in the room, basically in the chat room, I guess, with other students, where other students are looking at their responses, or are you just going through talking about one person's response to them?
I have two types of programs I'll do. One program within the courses is where students will submit their explanations in advance. And then I'll throw it up on the whiteboard and we'll analyze it together as a class. And then I have group coaching where students actually get on camera with me and we talk through their problems.
Gotcha. It looks like we have some questions here. So in terms of other, before we do, but in terms of other strategies for retakes, because I saw one student was talking about, prepping for the retaking for the October test. What other strategies? Like, what's the most common pitfall you find, other than the kid who waits until the last week before he's like, oh, I should crack this book?
I think the biggest mistake, honestly, aside from not spending enough time, is not spending enough time on the review process specifically. Students just take exam after exam. They measure the results. They get obsessive with like charts and spreadsheets and all that. But they just, after they take one exam, they move on to the next, hoping to get that, that randomized reward of getting a higher score. When in reality, the true value in doing an exam comes from getting questions wrong, finding out what you struggled with. If you work through 100 problems and you get 15 wrong and guess on another 10, that's 25 to review. Right. And that's where the gains of understanding come from, is when you can review all of those 25 so that you don't make those same mistakes again.
Right. And it's so funny. I mean, that logic or that pedagogy, I guess, continues over to the law school. Because when we prep students to really kick ass the first year, the biggest thing is really taking as many practice exams, even though there's no chance you'll see those questions again. It's getting familiar with the professor's writing style, the way they test, a lot of the questions, types that they're asking, and many of them are coachable. So I agree. Once you sit there and say, "Oh, I got this wrong" or "I got this right," let me move on and see if I can get more right on the next one. It doesn't do you much help unless you're actually sitting there saying, "Why did I get this wrong?" And like any good law student, the big thing that that will go through and course through the rest of your life is you will become the most skeptical person you'll ever meet in your life, and you'll be constantly asking, "Why? Why should I believe Steve Schwartz? Like why? Why should you do this? Why are they asking this? Why is the court saying this? Why are they using this logic rather than using a 4-part test? They're using a 3-part test like other courts." And it obviously plays into the same vein with students who want to excel on the LSAT. Do you want to take a couple questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
All right.
So we have one here from Brittany.
Oh, I'll let you read it off then, because my vision is not that great right now.
All right. Okay. Brittany's saying.
Oh yeah, there it is.
All right. Brittany's saying she took the LSAT in January. Can they use her writing section from that test, or should she submit a different one? She's taking it again in October. So once you've done the writing sample, you don't have to do another one ever again. Okay. Even if you've done the old paper LSAT, you did a writing sample for that, you don't need to do a new one, but you can if you like. And I think if you did a paper one where written by hand, it could be good to do a digital one just so they have an example they can actually read and make use of. But once you've done a digital writing, I wouldn't bother doing one again.
Gotcha. What about, how long's the new digital LSAT last? Is it still 5 years?
Yeah, it's still 5 years. The score reports are still good for 5 years.
Gotcha. Well, Brittany seems very happy. Hooray! We're happy to make you very, very happy, Brittany. All right. Do you have any specific this is from Allison. Do you have any specific recommendations for the prep books? Now, you mentioned the LSAT real tests that you can pull off of Amazon or the LSAT website. But what other books do you recommend?
Yeah, so the LSAT prep tests are, of course, the most important. Other than that, I think any of the well-reviewed ones would be fine as long as it's using real LSAT questions and it's published by a company that specializes exclusively in the LSAT. Like, you don't want to use LSAT for dummies or something like that, where they're using fake problems that contain mistakes and errors and typos. And the simulated LSAT questions rarely ever come close to the real thing. And if they contain mistakes, then you're just confusing yourself even more.
Right. I know the Bible series is, from the folks over at PowerScore is a popular one. Have you read it? Have you reviewed it?
Yeah, I think the PowerScore Bibles are a really good resource.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend those.
Yeah. All right. What happened to all our questions? I thought we had 4, but I guess it's just 4 comments from the same people. I guess your volume was down a little bit, Steve. So I don't know.
Was it? Yeah. Let me see.
Maybe that giant splatter thing in front of your mic. Steve, maybe you're a little too high tech for us.
Just for show, really. It doesn't actually do anything.
Are you ready for your freestyle rap? Are you?
No.
Dude, it's not happening?
No, I'm having tech issues, Don. I have to sign off.
What? I was going to bring Jay-Z in with that thing and rap battle you about the LSAT.
Well, I am in Brooklyn here, you know.
Well, I'll let him know. Maybe next time. So let's see. There's an LSAT every September. I'm targeting the law school for fall of 2021. I'm trying to figure out a study plan that will utilize all of my prep time. So that's a good question. I mean, so you've got about a year. You're about 2 years out. In terms of start date. This person, Stephen, would want to be applying probably, obviously next September. If you have a full year to wait on taking the LSAT, how would you manage your time?
Well, that's awesome.
You mentioned what? You said 15 hours a week, right? Is that the number? I forget.
Yeah, so I would say 15, 20 hours a week. And obviously, if you're studying over the course of an entire year, you could dampen that down a bit. But for someone like this who's got a year to study or a year before they apply, I would say aim to take the LSAT in the spring and then retake it in the fall if you need to. You could aim to take it. We're in September now. You could take it in March, then potentially retake it in July. And then if you're still not good, go for September. But I would really aim to go for a 6-month timeline and see how that plays out.
Right. In terms of budgeting, like how would you say, look, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to kick ass and master the reading comprehension section. And then once I've done that, then I will turn my attention to logic games. Or how would you budget your time in terms of studying for different parts of the exam?
Yeah, I definitely like the divide and conquer approach. I like focusing on one section, mastering that, moving on to the next. But I actually start with games because games are the scariest at first for most students, but they actually are the most learnable and perfectible. And so once you tackle that mysterious beast of games, then you get a big morale confidence boost. You can go in and tackle the others. And then once you move on to logical reasoning, still cycle in games to stay fresh, then cycle in reading comp while working on the others as well. But I'd start with one at the beginning.
Okay. So we have a question from Brian. Is it Brian here? Or Bran? I can't really say. But it's about, I guess there's a rumor that the logic game section has become harder than in the past. Is that true?
Yeah, so September, I think Brandy's referring to September's LSAT.
Brandy, I'm sorry. Brandy.
You got cut off for me too. Yes, so September's LSAT this past Saturday did have a notoriously difficult logic game section, and a lot of students were up in arms about it, very upset, surprised by it. And she's asking, is this the new normal? And why did this happen? I think LSAC is always looking to throw curveballs. They're always looking to ramp up the difficulty of the exam because people are prepping more than they used to. It's gotten more competitive. And so they want to kind of normalize the curve based in response to students. And so I do think games will get harder over time as they have been. They want to challenge students who are trying to copy someone else's technique or use too regimented an approach. And so the way to counteract that as a student is just be really good at games and do all the tough ones that have ever appeared. I have a list on my site, and I can also email it out to everyone afterwards of just all the tough games over the years. where I would really recommend focusing if you're looking to perfect them. And there's no reason you can't do all of those before even October.
Right. So just so the students know, because I'm going to post this as a video later on, what site, where would they find that list on your site?
So this is on my site, the LSAT blog. I have an article titled like Weird Curveball LSAT Logic Games.
Right. Okay. And I mean, is it a possibility that really hard section was the experimental? Are they still doing the experimental?
They are still doing experimentals, but what Brandy's referring to is the real scored section.
Damn. Sorry, Brandy. All right. I would have said like, well, maybe the optimist in me is like, yeah, that was the experimental section. Don't worry too much about it. But I guess maybe you have to worry a little bit. So I guess you mentioned before about doing some kind of rudimentary, highlighting and underlying on the digital tablet, right? And there's a question about how do you diagram if you need to diagram a logic game.
Yeah, sure. So to be clear, the digital LSAT has underlining and highlighting features, but I don't love them. The stylus is not that responsive, or the tablet's not that responsive to the stylus that they give you when you're.
Did you actually take it? Did you actually take it on the?
No, I haven't done the digital personal. I've only done it on my own. But
gotcha.
The stylus that they give you is not that responsive to the tab. Is not that doesn't work that well with the tablet. So
gotcha.
You could use your finger if you want, but even then it's not that precise. And so I would instead just use the scratch paper on the side. You can use a pencil or a pen, and they give you a booklet of about 12 to 14 pages, 8.5 by 11. So just do all your drawing there. And you kind of do have to go back and forth a little bit, but you can simulate that using even a prep book. Have your book, have separate scratch paper, and don't write on the book. Magic.
Right.
It's that simple.
And you were doing the same thing before. I mean, they gave you scratch paper before when you were taking the written exam.
They actually didn't. You had to use only the booklet. Oh, okay.
Yeah. You did that's right. You did it in the booklet, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. There's a question here about taking the LSAT multiple times. And I guess it's, common, urban myth is that it's frowned upon by taking it too many times. Is there an ideal time? Is that, in terms of your experience with admissions, law school admissions, is that true?
Well, obviously taking it once and getting a 180 is way better than taking it 5 times and only getting a 180 on the 5th time. But if you can improve, then it's worth retaking. They'd rather see a higher score, even if it means retaking. And there is a limit on that. I think 6 or 7 times, it looks like a little too much, but taking it even 3 or 4 times. It's like
a belt with suspenders. That's the kind of attorney I want to. That's the kind of guy I want to hire. It's like I'm gonna do everything I possibly can. All right.
Yeah. I think 3 or 4 times is totally fine. And if you can improve even a couple points, it is worth it. And you can also postpone if you're not ready, or withdraw if you're not ready. And so if the test week rolls around and you're not feeling that great, that doesn't have to be a take for you. Law schools will never even know that you were registered if you.
They won't know that, right? They will see the canceled score, though, right? They'll see that you canceled. I don't know if they see the score.
They see They see cancellations. Nobody ever sees the score of a canceled exam. But if you withdraw before the exam or postpone before the exam, they will never even know that you were registered. So that does not count as a take.
Right. In terms of like retaking, I'm just wondering, now that it's being offered so many times via digital, is a month really enough to say like, okay, I took it in September, I want to retake it in October? Is that really enough? Assuming the average person is, either, I mean, maybe if they're a senior in college, where you have more control over your schedule, and you really can buckle down and study really hard for a month. But imagine, the average age of people going to law school now has, increased dramatically. Most of those folks are probably working. Is a month really enough, or what would you recommend? Again, this is not you. This is your kid that you're advising about retaking the LSAT.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. A month is not that much time, to be fair. And of course, if someone waits the 3 weeks to get their score back, then they only have 1 week to actually study.
Right.
Not a great idea, of course. And so if September didn't go well, definitely keep studying. Don't maybe take a couple days off, but really try to just buckle down and focus. But the nice thing is that you also have November. Like you could just take September. If it didn't go great, do November instead. That way you have 2 months, which should be more time. And if you focus, plus you already have all the previous studying you've done under your belt, you might not need that much more. There also is an element of luck. LSAT scores have a score band. Of
wait, hold on. There's an element of luck?
There is, yeah.
Oh, okay. How come I didn't get lucky in the LSAT?
Well, I didn't say good luck necessarily.
Oh, okay.
There's an element, there's a 3.5 point score band on either end. So someone whose true aptitude is a 160, they might get a 160, they might get a 157, they might get a 164. And the LSAT's a totally valid exam. There is that margin on either end. And so if your true score is a 160, but September went poorly, you got a 157, you could just stay fresh and get a 164 the next time without improving understanding at all. And
or at least a 160, or at least a 160.
At least a 160. And if you actually study and actually improve your understanding, you could do even better than that. So, and because law schools don't average scores and only take the highest, there's really not much downside other than your LSAT registration fee and having to spend your weekends studying instead of partying.
Gotcha. In terms of, let's just talk about the cost of it. In terms of the cost of, taking the LSAT for somebody who hasn't explored it. What's it cost?
So it costs $200 to register.
Okay.
And then
that's just that's a one-time shot at it.
That's for each take. So if you took it 3 times, $600. They do have a fee waiver program for those who demonstrate financial need. I recommend submitting that early because they take a while to process it, but that can help you save some money. Where they make their money, though, really is on the fees. Like if you postpone, there's a fee to postpone to a later test date. If you register late, there's a fee for that. And so you want to go on their site, be on top of all the deadlines, maybe add them to your calendar so that you're not paying up the nose for all these different little things.
Gotcha. Do you have a calendar on your website that might be a nice little feature, is the ICS calendar that you just download?
Well, that's a good idea.
Excuse me. I'm full of great ideas. All right,
I'm going to write this down.
Jesus Christ. I invented the iPhone too. I just didn't execute on it. All right. That was my problem. Damn, I had this Palm Pilot and a flip phone, and I was like, wouldn't it be great if we combine these things? No, I mean, that would be a cool thing, is, obviously, is to keep everybody on task, because those fees do. I know that, having looked at it, the later you go, the more expensive it gets, and there's no reason to pay it, take that. Is the same thing applying now in terms of those deadlines with the digital exam happening so often?
Yeah, there still are all the same deadlines and associated fees and such. And because there's 9 or 10 test dates, LSAC is raking in the dough on all those fees. And we had a comment from Brittany here saying, apply for the fee waiver. If you get denied, you can appeal the fee waiver. That's a great point. And you can show extra documentation if they deny you the first time. It is worth retrying. Gotcha. And we have Cynthia saying that she appealed. It was approved. So definitely worth doing. We have a couple people who benefited there.
Yeah, for a couple $100, that's definitely. I mean, it would pay for at least a half a mug of tea for him,
right?
In terms of your organic chai, whatever the hell you're drinking tea. All right. So last bit of advice before we let these folks go. We've kept them on the line for about 50 minutes. What would be your overall best tip for the LSAT? All right, and the thing that you've seen students do that is a absolute must no. Like, what is the biggest pitfall that most students see?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I guess I've said a lot already, but one thing I haven't said is that these cold diagnostics that students take, they can be really discouraging at first. So don't let your diagnostic score hang over you like a dark cloud of despair. It does not define you. It's only a starting point. And
you sound like Oprah.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be all motivational. Rah, rah, yeah.
Go.
It's all that tea I've been drinking. But it doesn't define you. It's just a starting point. I know that you can improve significantly from there. Just have a systematic plan of attack. And that's what that laser approach I mentioned is: learning, accuracy, sections, exams, review. It's what my study plans are all based upon, the month-by-month ones, the day-by-day ones on my site, where I lay out exactly what to be doing, how to use the LSAT exams, how to use the LSAT prep tests, the theory, the articles on my site. I pull it all together for you to make it easy to use. As for the absolute no-no, I would say, absolute no-nos. Spend less time on the message boards online. They're instead of reading about other people studying and the stories they make up about what they've done, just focus on your own study process. Don't get wrapped up in what they're doing. Just focus on yourself. Hit the books.
It's funny. One of the so we're actually doing a law school admissions roundtable where we've got 10 law school admissions deans who are basically answering a bunch of questions, and for that we get constantly about the law school admissions process. And based on that survey that we did last year of law school admissions deans, in terms of like what part of the question do you read first? What Democrat? What political party are you most affiliated with? Which overwhelmingly Democrat. But the one thing they kept saying was that, oh shoot, now I'm like drawing a blank on your last piece of advice, because it was playing off of that.
I was seeing the message boards and focusing on your own study.
So they were saying that exactly that. It's like in terms of the number of people, the admissions deans who look at those message boards, it was like 75%. And then the follow-up question that was, how often are they inaccurate when they reference your school? And it was like plus 90%. Like they don't for some reason, I guess, if it's on the internet, it's not always true.
Russia's on those boards too.
Well, listen, I mean, there might be, don't even start me. All right. All right. But listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to clarify this. I know that the digital LSAT has been, there's been a lot of questions surrounding it. This I hopefully made folks feel a lot better about, approaching the LSAT and ultimately going to law school.
No, thanks, Tom. This was fantastic. Thank you for the chat and the conversation. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to getting this out for everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Dude, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll do this again, because I really enjoyed chatting. I'll be like the Gale to your Oprah. How's that?
Perfect. Then we can flip the script as always.
All right. Take it easy, man.
All right, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.